Blackfoot River, casting for memories with the same reverence that he reserves for trout. Planting his feet in the slowly deepening riverbed, Norman begins to hear the long story of his life cascading by. From his birth in Missoula, Montana, where the river banks were the breasts on which he fed as a child, through a restive adolescent initiation into roaring rapids, the still reflections of his first love, to the dark eddies of gambling and debt that pulled his brother under. Now all are gone home before him in that great race to the sea. Eventually, Norman concludes from the timeless, sibilant prayer of water on rock, eventually all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. There is a river that runs through us. It is mystery, it is light, some say God. It descends through my granite soul with the force of gravity and love, plunges through empty canyons, chisels out corridors with its wet hands, and slowly, ever so, widens the cracks and crevices of my failures into pools where grace collects. The injury of the river is also its gift. Where I have been cut deeply, so there life most deeply, most surely flows. I don't believe that the gifts of God come in the form of goodness, but in the face of life itself, in danger's shadow as well as dazzling light, in a disquieted heart as often as a still mind, in labor as in love. If we would receive the sacred, we must receive the river's flow, even as it injures, even as it takes away. I thank God for my handicap, said Helen Keller, unable to hear a babbling stream or see its glistening green or put it into praise, yet she praises. I thank God for my handicaps, for through them I have found myself, my work, my God. That to me is thanksgiving. It's not about being glad for the good things that have happened to us. They are simply moments in the sun. Thanksgiving is standing still with an injured and an open heart and letting the river run freely through us. Each year at this time I stop and cast into the river. I recount the story of the year past, of life given and taken away, our planet's staggering losses, our moments of forgiveness, our fulgent gains. I think of a friend's child who came swimming into this world on amniotic rivers, and I remember my grandmother's final crossing over to the other shore. I remember the intense hopes of eyes brimming with the vows of marriage and the loosening tears of those whose hope was broken. I think of my own love found or friends lost. We are what we are given and what is taken away. Blessed by the name of the giver and taker. The confluence of all things returns to the sea, the source. The gift unites with the giver. Let the river run. The banks of my heart are wide with thanks. As a spiritual practice. My wise colleagues Christine Robinson and Alicia Hawkins wrote this a few years ago. Whatever one's beliefs about faith and grace, gratitude is basic. Like hope, trust, and love, gratitude is both a feeling and a spiritual practice. Though we have little control over our immediate feelings, we can't decide to cultivate the ground in which those feelings thrive. Unquote. Feelings come and go. And part of the spiritual maturity is to realize that we have feelings, but we are not just the feelings we have. There's more to us than that. To say that gratitude is both a feeling and a spiritual practice is to say that we have some choice in the latter which we don't in the former. At any moment of the day, we can choose to live in gratitude, We can choose not only to be grateful, but to realize our gratefulness. And when we appreciate that life is a collection of moments, we can choose to live our lives in gratitude, to dedicate our lives to thanking. Some would say that's the definition of religion, a life lived in thanks. But what is a spiritual practice? We tend to think of it as a disciplined activity, like prayer every morning, or yoga, or meditation, walking the labyrinth, where we have set aside some time out of our busy day to retreat and take stock and commune with ourselves or with God. These are spiritual disciplines, where we give up other things to do them. Out of the chatter of our minds and the ceaseless pull of our schedule and the striving to accomplish work, we train ourselves to follow a path. Spiritual practice is a broader term than spiritual discipline. It embraces spiritual discipline, but also includes those things we do and the thoughts and feelings we have in reaction to the events of the day. We might try to follow a rule, for example, that when someone has said something mean or cutting to us, we resist the impulse to respond in kind, but instead try to return kindness. That's a spiritual practice. Mindfulness is an example of something that is both a spiritual practice and a spiritual discipline. As a discipline, we might engage in mindfulness meditation at regular hours each day, trying to empty our minds of other thoughts and feelings and concentrate on the breathing. But as a spiritual practice, mindfulness can come into play whenever we are called to interact with another, and consists of paying attention to all the factors in your physical and social environment, listening and looking carefully, understanding yourself and your reaction buttons. It is in this sense that gratitude is a spiritual practice. It is an act of will. It is saying, I am choosing to be grateful. It's different from the feeling of gratitude. The feeling comes over you when you have something to be grateful for. You've won the lottery. The one you just proposed to has accepted your offer of marriage. A child or a grandchild was born. The feeling of gratitude you might have on these occasions springs from the external circumstances. And there's nothing wrong with feeling gratitude when Lady Luck has smiled on you. It's perfectly natural. But you can choose to go beyond this. You can take charge of your own gratitude. You can make up your mind that you're going to opt for gratitude, whatever the external circumstances. Why would you do this? Because it's the way to live your life in deep happiness. Not joy 24/7, not perpetual ecstasy, but it is my conviction and observation that people who accustom themselves to look for the blessings in every situation, no matter how adverse, are on the whole happier in their lives than people who are always looking for the downside. Susan Hall writes, I don't believe that the gifts of God come in the form of goodness, but in the face of life itself, in danger's shadow as well as dazzling light, in a disquieted heart as often as a still mind, in labor as in love. If we would receive the sacred, we must receive the river's flow, even as it injures, even as it takes away. I can remember as if it were yesterday, one of the most poignantly sad moments of my life, on my daughter's 18th birthday. In October of that year, her mother and I had decided that we would split up. That we decided not to tell the children until after Christmas, because our daughter, a senior in prep school, was in the middle of applying to colleges. She was still unaware of this impending split by the time her birthday rolled around December 21st. But by then she had been accepted in early admission to her first choice college, NYU. I was in my second year of divinity school, and I took her and her boyfriend out to celebrate with a fine dinner followed by the Christmas revels in Cambridge. Then drove him back to his parents' house in Concord, and then my daughter and I went to my cousin's house in Newton, where I was living at the time. In the kitchen of that house, before she went to bed, Sally told me with shining eyes, I am so lucky. I have everything I want. It is so great, I feel almost like something bad must be about to happen to happened in her life, in all of our lives, was about to happen. The day after Christmas in Charleston, we told the children. My divorce is still the worst thing that has happened in my life, which is probably good news because a lot of you have had a lot worse things happen in your lives. While it is missing the ugliness and wrangling of a lot of other divorces, it left deep wounds that to some extent are still with all who were affected. It presents a challenge to me as I think about it. Can I look into those times and be grateful? I'm grateful that I found another love who has been a good partner in my ministry. And I'm grateful that I'm on good civil terms with my ex-wife and that my children have never been estranged from me. But I look beyond that and try to understand that it is a good thing even that my heart was broken. My struggle as a minister, as a recovering lawyer, is to get out of my head, to open my heart to others and to the world and to God. A heart that has not been broken is harder to open. One way that I keep my heart open is that I continue to weep for the demise of my first marriage, even as I give thanks for my second. Well, that's me. In your life, the hard stuff might be something else altogether. You may be carrying bitterness from a betrayal, or just disappointment from a prize you didn't win, resentment of neighbors or acquaintances who seem to have it all together, envy of people who always have enough money to take those splendid vacations. How can you take these negative emotions and turn them into gratitude? That is a spiritual challenge. Now you may say, well, it's a foolish challenge. If things are really bad, it's better to recognize that they just suck, rather than trying to deny reality. I agree. I don't want anyone sticking their head in the sand. We all have temptations to overlook the tough stuff, to say I'll deal with that tomorrow, or just to deny that the problems exist. I'm not advocating an ostrich strategy. I'm inviting you to look at the worst squarely and find something in it for which you can be grateful. And again, you will ask me why. Why should I be grateful for the bad news the doctor just gave me, of the lawsuit papers that were just served on me? So you forced me to confess. I do have a hidden agenda. My hidden agenda is called universalism. Universalism posits that there is a God and that God is all-powerful and that God is love and a force of goodness in the world. But I'm not here pleading in this year 2012 for anyone to embrace a belief in God, nor am I trying to talk anyone out of a belief in God. I'm suggesting that your life will be richer if you embrace goodness. Not as a matter of belief, but as a matter of faith. Faith is a willed option. You decide what you will put your faith into. You may believe in the theory of evolution, or believe that the world was made in 7 days. Faith is a lot more like trust than it is like belief. When I get on an airplane, I don't know that it has been completely checked out and all the systems are in place, that all the screws are tightened so that it is safe to fly. I trust that all these things are in order. Getting on the plane is a leap of faith, that the system of airline safety is working adequately to get me to my destination. Our first principle is a covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. This is not a statement of belief that all people are worthy, for such statement would be contradicted by the evidence of our own eyes and ears that some people are scoundrels. Rather, the first principle is a faith statement. We choose to treat all persons as having inherent worth and dignity, for that is how we want to live our lives and how we want people to treat one another. In the same way, we can look for goodness, we can look for blessings as we live our lives, because that is how we choose to live. We can look for blessings where the cut is deepest. I stopped drinking, as I've said before, with the help of Alcoholics Anonymous, and like a lot of you, I was put off at first by the God language of the 12-step program. It seems that it required a belief in a much more personal and intimate deity than my rational mind would allow. But in conversations with my sponsors and others, I realized that the most important function for God in the recovery process is that it was some entity outside yourself to which you let yourself be responsible. A higher power, as the literature puts it. That higher power can be the AA meeting, or your sponsor, or your therapist. It does not require you to believe in supernatural beings. This is important for all of us, for it is not only alcoholics who are subject to narcissism. We all benefit from realizing our connection to entities outside ourselves. In fact, our seventh principle calls us to be aware of the interconnected web of all existence. We are one node on a mighty network stretching around the universe. Look at it in terms of genealogy. Your own existence is due most immediately to your own parents. But stop and think what kind of miracle it is that you or I came into being at all. As my late colleague Forrest Church once expressed it, your parents had to couple at precisely the right moment for the one possible sperm to fertilize the one possible egg that would result in your conception. Right then, the odds were still 3 million to 1 against your being the biological answer to the question your parents were consciously or unconsciously posing. And that's just the beginning of the miracle. The same unlikely happenstance must repeat itself throughout the generations. Going back 10 generations, this miracle must repeat itself 1,000 times. 1,300,000 times going back only 20 generations. End quote. The fact that we are here at all is due to many factors, most of which are outside our conscious control. And all this knowledge we have in our noggins, and the skills with which we use this knowledge to get our daily bread, that didn't just spring there at birth or descend from a cloud because of our inherent worth. No, there were legions of teachers along the way that taught us what we know and how to cope. There's a passage in Deuteronomy 6 which talks about living in cities we did not build and drinking from wells we did not dig. Dick Fuchs used this in the gratitude meditation that we read earlier. None of us got there through our own labors, and to recognize this is to adopt an attitude of gratitude, regardless of whether we believe in any divine agency. In Theravada Buddhism, there's a recognition that you owe a debt to your parents that you can never repay, because they brought you into the world, wiped your nose and your bottom, carried you when you could not walk, fed you when you could not get food for yourself. In Sri Lanka, even sophisticated westernized families will put a little food aside on their plates at the evening meal to feed the hungry ghosts of the parents. The ghosts are depicted in Buddhist art as having huge bellies and tiny necks so they can never get enough food. They're always hungry. To whom are we grateful? Some will call the object of gratitude God, but for others I would simply suggest the source of our blessings, the source of your blessings. For that phrase will encompass your parents, your teachers, lovers, children, heroes, right down to the sunsets and the fishes in the sea, all the people that have made you who you are and have made your joy what it is. Whatever or whoever has bestowed on you a blessing, even if it is your worst enemy, even if it is someone out to hurt you, deserves your thanks. In 12-step programs and on other spiritual paths, people often make a gratitude list, a daily list of things you are grateful for. There's something very healing about doing this, for it focuses the mind on the positive. But I've seen a variant which is much more interesting. People ask to make a list of the things they fear most, and then to make a list of the things for which they're most grateful. You'd be amazed at how many of the same things end up on both lists. I met a man this weekend who has a 21-year-old son who's a student at NYU in Lower Manhattan. His son had been without power for 10 days and without heat or hot water for 2 weeks. The son resolved to tough it out. He was putting on a play, and his father and mother came to New York to see it, and stayed in a hotel in Midtown, which had plenty of power and water. They invited the son to sleep on a couch, or at least to come and take a shower, but he declined. He didn't want to indulge in those luxuries while his downtown schoolmates were still in the cold and dark. He told his parents, "We're so lucky. The people on Long Island don't even have houses." And that's gratitude. I talked a moment ago about lists. A gratitude list is a common spiritual practice. I was about to put an insert in your order 1, 2, 3 down the left side. The fact that I didn't do so probably reflects my own distaste for lists. You can make gratitude lists if you wish, but my take-home, my recommendation for us all this morning is that we cultivate a general attitude of gratitude, thanks as a spiritual discipline, not just at Thanksgiving, but throughout the year, not just in the good times, but in the bad ones as well, that we accustom ourselves to looking for reasons to give thanks and to give them freely. As Susan Hull says, we are what we are given, and what is taken away. Blessed by the name of the giver and the taker. The confluence of all things returns to the sea, the source. The gift unites with the giver. Let the river run. The banks of my heart are wide